Please, Claire Whitmore whispered, pressing her trembling hand against her daughter's forehead. Don't fall asleep before somebody helps us. The automatic doors of Mercy General slid open with a tired hiss as she stumbled inside at 1:17 in the morning, soaked from the cold Boston rain, her 5-year-old daughter burning in her arms like a small furnace wrapped in a pink blanket. Lily's cheek was pressed against Claire's collarbone, her breath shallow and uneven, each little exhale brushing Claire's skin with frightening heat. The fever had started before dinner, just a little warmth at first, the kind every mother told herself not to panic over. But by midnight, the number on the thermometer had climbed to 103.8. 15 minutes later, it flashed 104.6, and Claire stopped pretending she could handle it with cool washcloths, children's medicine, and whispered prayers in a one-bedroom apartment where the heat barely worked and the kitchen light flickered when it rained. She had thrown on the first sweater she could find, wrapped Lily in the blanket with faded unicorns, and run 3 blocks to the bus stop before realizing the last bus had already gone. So she had carried her daughter instead, half walking, half stumbling through puddles, her sneakers soaked through, her lungs aching in the sharp night air. Now the bright hospital lights made everything feel too white, too loud, too far away. The waiting room smelled like sanitizer and burnt coffee. A television murmured from one corner, showing a late-night weather report no one was watching. A young father paced near the vending machines with a sleeping toddler on his shoulder. An older woman coughed softly into a tissue. Behind the glass at the intake desk, a receptionist looked up with the tired expression of someone who had seen too many emergencies to be startled by one more. "My daughter has a fever," Claire said, her voice cracking as she shifted Lily higher against her chest. "It's over 104. She's not acting right. Please, she needs to be seen now." The receptionist's eyes moved from Lily's flushed face to the computer screen. "Name? Lily Whitmore. Date of birth?" Claire answered automatically, because mothers remembered those details even when their hands were shaking, even when fear was beating so hard in their ribs that it felt like another heart. Lily whimpered, a small sound that nearly broke Claire in half. "Mommy," she breathed, barely audible. "I'm cold." Claire looked down, terrified by the contradiction of it, the way her child could feel cold while her skin burned. "I know, baby. I've got you. We're here now." The receptionist typed for a moment, then frowned. "Do you have your insurance card?" Claire nodded quickly and dug into the pocket of her damp jeans with one hand, refusing to put Lily down. Her fingers found the worn plastic card, bent at one corner from years of being carried in the same cheap wallet. She slid it through the opening beneath the glass. The receptionist scanned it once. Then again, the frown deepened. Claire felt the room tilt slightly before the woman even spoke. "Ma'am, this coverage is coming back inactive." "No, that can't be right," Claire said too fast. "It was active last month. I used it for her checkup. It says the dependent was removed from the policy." The words landed softly, almost politely, but Claire felt them like a door closing. "Removed? No, she's 5. She's my daughter. There has to be a mistake." Lily's head rolled weakly against her shoulder, and Claire tightened her arms around her. "Please, can someone just check her first? I'll figure out the paperwork after. I'll sign whatever you need. I'll pay in installments. I only have $18 right now, but I get paid Friday, and I can." She stopped because saying it out loud made the shame real. $18.42. That was what stood between her child and the kind of help rich people never had to beg for. The receptionist's face softened, but her voice stayed careful. "I'll mark her as urgent, but without active coverage or authorization, you'll need to wait for triage to review her." "How long?" Claire asked. The woman glanced toward the double doors where nurses moved in and out without looking at her. "I can't give an exact time." Behind Claire, a man lowered the magazine he had not been reading. He sat alone in the far corner of the waiting room, wearing a plain black coat still dotted with rain, his salt and pepper hair slightly damp, his face calm in a way that did not match the hour or the place. He had noticed Claire the moment she came in, noticed the broken lace on one sneaker, the soaked hem of her sweater, the way she held the little girl as if her own body could keep the fever from rising. He had heard the number, 104.6. He had also heard the word inactive. Claire did not see him yet. She only saw the receptionist, the glass, the computer, and the impossible space between rules and mercy. Lily stirred again, her small fingers clutching weakly at Claire's sweater. "Mommy," she whispered, her eyes barely opening. "Don't let me sleep." Claire's breath caught. The room blurred at the edges. "I won't," she promised, though she had no idea how to keep it. "I won't, sweetheart." And from the corner of the waiting room, the unknown man stood up. The unknown man did not rush at first. He moved with the kind of quiet control that made people step aside without knowing why, one hand slipping into the pocket of his black coat as his eyes stayed on the child in Claire's arms. Claire barely noticed him. Her attention was fixed on the receptionist, on the small plastic insurance card lying uselessly behind the glass, on the word inactive glowing on the computer screen like a sentence she could not appeal. "There has to be another option," Claire said, trying to keep her voice steady and failing. "She is 5 years old. She has had this fever for hours. She is confused, she is shivering, and she keeps saying she wants to sleep. Please, just let a nurse look at her." The receptionist pressed her lips together, sympathy flickering behind the exhaustion in her eyes. "I understand, ma'am. I really do. But I cannot move her ahead without triage approval unless she is coded critical." "Then get triage," Claire said, and immediately hated the sharpness in her own voice. She was not angry at this woman. She was angry at the clock, at the rain, at the broken system, at the empty space where help should have been. "I am sorry. I am sorry. Lily made a soft sound against her shoulder, and Claire looked down. Her daughter's eyelashes trembled. Her cheeks were too red, her lips too pale. "Baby, look at me," Claire whispered. "Can you open your eyes for Mommy?" Lily tried. That was what terrified Claire most. She tried, but her eyelids only lifted halfway before sliding closed again. Claire turned away from the desk, searching the room for anyone in scrubs, anyone who looked like they could make a decision. A nurse passed through the double doors carrying a clipboard, moving quickly. "Excuse me," Claire called. "Please, my daughter has a fever of 104.6. The nurse slowed, glanced at Lily, then at the intake desk. "Have you checked in? They said her insurance is inactive. We will get to you as soon as we can," the nurse said gently, but she was already being called by another staff member. The double doors swung shut behind her. Claire stood there with her mouth slightly open, feeling foolish for believing that desperation had its own language everyone understood. It did not. Desperation needed a policy number. It needed a signature. It needed money she did not have. Her phone buzzed in her coat pocket, and for one wild second she thought it might be help. But the screen showed the name she had been dreading and needing at the same time. "Mark Reynolds." She answered with one hand, Lily heavy against her other arm. "Mark, thank God. I am at Mercy General with Lily. Her fever is over 104, and they are saying the insurance is inactive. Did something happen with the policy?" A tired sigh came through the phone, followed by the faint sound of a television in the background. "Claire, it is the middle of the night. I know what time it is. Our daughter is sick." There was a pause. Not concern, not alarm, just irritation looking for the shortest way out. "She is your daughter, Claire. You wanted full custody. Handle it." Claire closed her eyes for 1 second, only one, because she could not afford to fall apart. "This is not about custody. This is about her insurance." Her name was removed. "Then call the insurance company in the morning." "She cannot wait until morning." Her voice broke on the last word, and she hated that he could hear it. "Mark, please. If you change something, if there is paperwork, just tell me what to say. They need authorization." "I did not change anything that matters," he said flatly. "And I am not coming down there because you panicked over a fever." Claire stared at the rainy black windows across the waiting room, seeing her reflection holding a child who looked smaller by the minute. "She asked me not to let her sleep." For the first time, silence came through the line. Claire held her breath. Then Mark said, colder than before, "Stop making everything dramatic." Something inside Claire went still. Not healed, not stronger, just still enough to stop begging. "Goodbye, Mark." She ended the call before he could answer. Her hand shook so badly that the phone nearly slipped from her fingers. Lily stirred again and whispered something Claire could not understand. Claire bent close. "What, sweetheart?" Lily's eyes moved beneath her lids. "Cold," she murmured. "So cold." Claire pressed her cheek to Lily's hair. It smelled faintly of strawberry shampoo and rainwater. I know. The room felt farther away now, the voices muffled, the fluorescent lights humming above her like insects. She walked toward the nearest row of chairs because her knees had begun to tremble. Before she could sit, a deep voice spoke from her right, low enough that it did not startle the child. How long has she been burning like this? Claire turned. The man in the black coat stood a few feet away. Up close, he looked older than she had first thought, maybe late 30s or early 40s, with gray at his temples and eyes that were not soft exactly, but sharply attentive. He was not looking at her the way other people in the waiting room had looked at her, with pity first and distance second. He was looking at Lily as if every detail mattered. Claire instinctively held her daughter closer. "Since tonight," she said. "It got worse after midnight. Has she had a seizure? Trouble breathing? Rash?" The questions came too precise for ordinary curiosity. Claire's fear shifted shape. "Are you a doctor?" He hesitated just long enough for the answer to feel incomplete. "No, then why are you asking?" "Because she does not look like a child who should be waiting." Claire's throat tightened. For a moment she could not speak. The kindness in his words was almost worse than indifference, because it gave her something to lean toward. "They said her insurance is inactive," she whispered. "I have $18. I called her father. He will not come." The man's jaw changed, not dramatically, but enough. A small tightening. A decision made somewhere behind his eyes. He looked toward the double doors, then back at Lily. "What is her name?" "Lily. Lily," he repeated quietly, as though committing it to memory. Then he stepped away, took out his phone, and made one call. The call lasted less than 20 seconds, but Claire felt every second stretch until it seemed to fill the entire waiting room. The man turned slightly away from her, his voice low enough that she could not catch every word, yet clear enough for a few phrases to cut through the hum of lights and late-night murmurs. "Pediatric emergency," he said. "Female child, 5 years old, fever 104.6, altered responsiveness. Open room 3. Bring Dr. Patel down now. Bill it to my account." Claire stared at him, not understanding. People did not talk that way unless they already knew the answer would be yes. People did not call a hospital at 1 in the morning and order doors to open. Her arms tightened around Lily, who had gone quiet against her chest, too quiet. The man ended the call and slipped the phone back into his coat, as if he had done nothing more unusual than check the time. "Someone is coming," he said. Claire blinked at him. "Who did you call?" "The person who should have been called when you walked in." Before she could ask what that meant, the double doors at the end of the waiting room swung open so hard that the young father near the vending machines turned around. A woman in navy scrubs hurried through first, followed by 2 nurses and a tall man in a white coat with a stethoscope already in his hand. The receptionist behind the glass sat up straighter, her tired expression changing into something close to alarm. "Lily Whitmore, the woman in navy scrubs called." Claire stepped forward, almost afraid to answer. "Yes, that is my daughter. I am charge nurse Elena Morris. We are taking her back now." The nurse reached for Lily with practiced gentleness, but Claire pulled back by instinct. "I need to stay with her." "You will," the doctor said, his voice calm but urgent. "I am Dr. Samuel Patel. We are going to check her vitals, start fluids if needed, and bring her fever down safely. You can walk with us." Claire looked from the doctor to the man in the black coat. He gave one small nod, as if telling her not to waste another second on confusion. She followed the medical team through the double doors, her wet sneakers squeaking against the polished floor. Everything changed beyond those doors. The waiting room had felt slow and sealed off, but the emergency corridor moved like a living thing. A nurse guided Claire to a treatment room with pale blue walls and a child-sized blanket folded on the bed. Another nurse took Lily's temperature again, then called out numbers Claire barely heard because she was watching her daughter's face. Lily stirred when they placed her on the bed, her small hand reaching blindly until Claire caught it. "Mommy is here," Claire whispered. "I am right here." Dr. Patel listened to Lily's breathing, checked her pupils, asked Claire when the fever started, what medicine she had given, whether Lily had eaten, whether she had been around anyone sick. Claire answered as fast as she could, stumbling over details, apologizing whenever her voice shook. "Do not apologize," Dr. Patel said, without looking away from Lily. "You brought her in. That was the right thing." Those words nearly undid her. For hours, maybe for years, Claire had felt as if every choice she made was judged by what she lacked. Not enough money, not enough help, not enough time, not enough of whatever other mothers seemed to have when the world turned cruel. Hearing one person say she had done the right thing made her eyes burn, but she forced herself to stay upright. The man in the black coat remained just outside the room at first, standing near the doorway with his hands at his sides. He did not intrude. He did not ask for gratitude. He simply watched the team work, his expression unreadable except for the tension along his jaw. A nurse glanced toward him while adjusting the monitor lead on Lily's small finger, and her face changed. Recognition flashed, quick and unmistakable. "Mr. Caldwell," she said under her breath. The room seemed to still for half a second. The man's eyes moved to her, not harshly, but with enough warning that she immediately looked back at her patient. Claire heard the name. She held it in her mind, trying to place it through fear and exhaustion. Caldwell. It sounded familiar, the way names on buildings sounded familiar, the way names in newspaper headlines lived somewhere in the background of ordinary lives. But Lily whimpered, and the thought vanished. "Her pulse is high," one nurse said. "We are starting fluids," Dr. Patel replied. "Let us get labs and a chest x-ray if her breathing does not improve. And bring cooling packs, not ice." Claire stroked Lily's damp hair back from her forehead. "Is she going to be okay?" It was the question she had been terrified to ask because answers could break people. Dr. Patel met her eyes. "She is very sick, but she is in the right place now. We are moving quickly." Claire nodded, gripping Lily's fingers. On the other side of the doorway, the man called Mr. Caldwell took one step back and made another quiet call. This time Claire heard only the last sentence. "Find out why that child was removed from coverage." Claire did not realize how cold she was until a nurse draped a warmed hospital blanket around her shoulders. The heat sank through her rain-soaked sweater, and for a moment her body wanted to collapse into it, but she would not let herself sit. Not yet. Lily lay on the narrow emergency bed with a small monitor clipped to her finger, an intravenous line taped carefully to the back of her hand, and a cooling cloth folded across her forehead. Her cheeks were still flushed, but her breathing had begun to sound less frantic, and Claire watched every rise and fall of her daughter's chest, as if the pattern itself was holding the world together. "Her temperature is coming down slowly," Nurse Morris said, checking the screen beside the bed. 103.7 now. That is movement in the right direction. Claire nodded, but relief felt dangerous, like stepping onto ice that might crack beneath her. "She still feels so hot." "She is still very feverish," Dr. Patel said from the foot of the bed, reviewing notes on a tablet. "But she is responding. We are waiting on blood work, and we may need imaging if anything changes. For now, fluids, fever control, and close monitoring." Claire tried to absorb the words, but the numbers and medical terms passed through her like rain through an open hand. What stayed was this: Lily was being treated. Someone was watching her. Someone had moved fast enough. Claire turned toward the doorway. The man in the black coat stood just outside, speaking quietly with a hospital administrator who had appeared minutes earlier in a gray suit. His hair still flattened on one side, as if he had been called from bed. The administrator kept nodding. Not polite nodding, nervous nodding. "I do not want her mother approached about billing tonight," the man said, his voice calm enough to be frightening. "Not by intake, not by accounts, not by anyone. Her child receives care first. Everything else waits." "Of course, Mr. Caldwell," the administrator said quickly. "I will make sure the team understands." "No," the man replied. "Make sure the system understands." Claire looked away before either of them noticed her listening. "Mr. Caldwell." There it was again. The name pressed against something in her memory, but she was too tired to open that door. She lowered herself into the chair beside Lily's bed and took her daughter's warm hand between both of hers. Lily's fingers twitched weakly. "Mommy." Her voice was barely more than breath. Claire leaned close, tears gathering before she could stop them. "I am here, sweetheart. Can we go home?" The question was so small, so ordinary, that it hurt more than panic. "Not yet. The doctors are helping you." Lily's eyes opened a sliver. "The man." Claire glanced toward the doorway. He was alone now, looking down at his phone, his expression focused and distant. "He helped us get a doctor." "Is he nice?" Claire swallowed. She did not know how to answer that. Nice was too simple for a stranger who could change the speed of an entire hospital with one phone call. "I think so," she said softly. "He seems nice." Lily's eyes drifted shut again, but this time her breathing stayed steady. Claire bowed her head and let out a silent breath she felt she had been holding since midnight. A few seconds later, Footsteps approached. The man stopped at the threshold, not entering until Claire looked up. "May I?" he asked. It was the first time anyone had asked her permission all night. Claire nodded. He stepped inside but kept a respectful distance from the bed. Under the brighter light, she saw details she had missed before. The expensive cut of his coat despite its simplicity, the faint shadow of sleeplessness beneath his eyes, the kind of stillness that belonged to men who were used to being obeyed and tired of what that had cost them. "Her fever is coming down," Claire said, because she did not know what else to say. "I heard. Thank you." The words felt too small. She tried again. "I do not know who you are, or why they listened to you, but thank you." He looked at Lily before answering. "My name is Ethan Caldwell." Claire went still. Caldwell Medical Group. The name flashed across her mind at last. From commercials in waiting rooms, plaques in hospital lobbies, articles shared by people who liked stories about billionaires funding new pediatric wings. She looked toward the hallway, then back at him. "You own this hospital." "Part of the network," he said. "That is not the same thing. It is close enough when everyone starts running after you make a call." Something almost like a smile touched his face, but it did not last. "They should have been running before I called." Claire dropped her gaze. Pride rose automatically, defensive and tired. "I cannot pay for this. Not tonight. Maybe not for a long time. I need you to understand that before this becomes something I cannot get out from under." "Your daughter is not a debt," Ethan said. The quiet force of it made Claire look up. "She is a child who needed care." Claire's eyes burned again, and she hated that. He kept finding the exact places where she had no armor. People always say things like that until the bill arrives. Ethan did not argue. He simply took a folded paper from inside his coat and placed it on the counter near the sink, not close enough to pressure her into taking it. "My assistant is checking the insurance issue. I did not ask for your permission because Lily needed help immediately. But from this point on, I will not do anything involving your personal information without telling you first." Claire stared at the paper without touching it. "Why would you do that for us?" Ethan's eyes moved briefly to Lily's small hand in hers. "Because someone removed a sick child from coverage, and that is not a clerical error I am willing to ignore." Before Claire could respond, Dr. Patel appeared in the doorway holding a lab report, his expression careful. "Miss Whitmore, we have the first results back. Lily is stable for the moment, but there is something unusual in her blood work that we need to discuss." Ethan turned slightly, and Claire felt the air in the room change. "Unusual how?" she asked. Dr. Patel looked from Claire to Lily, then back again. "Her blood type is extremely rare." Claire stared at Dr. Patel as if the words had reached her from the far end of a tunnel. "Rare?" she repeated, her voice thin. "What does that mean? Is that why she is sick?" Dr. Patel stepped farther into the room, lowering his voice in the careful way doctors did when they wanted to calm a parent without hiding the truth. "Not necessarily. Her fever is most likely related to an infection, and we are still running tests to confirm the source. But her blood work shows a very uncommon blood type. It matters because if she needs a transfusion, even a small one, matching her safely could take more time than usual." Claire's hand closed tighter around Lily's fingers. The monitor beside the bed kept beeping in a steady rhythm, but suddenly every sound in the room felt sharper. "A transfusion? We are not there right now," Dr. Patel said quickly. "I do not want you to hear that and panic. Lily is stable. Her oxygen is acceptable, her fever is trending down, and we are treating her aggressively. I am telling you because we always prepare for possibilities, especially with a child this young." Claire nodded because she understood the words, but her body did not believe them. Her body heard prepare and rare and child, and it wanted to fold in on itself. She looked at Lily, at the cooling cloth on her forehead, at the small pink blanket now tucked around her by a nurse who had probably done that for hundreds of children, but somehow made it feel personal. "How rare?" Claire asked. Dr. Patel hesitated, then answered honestly. "Rare enough that we are checking the hospital supply and the regional blood bank now." The room went quiet except for the monitor. Claire felt Ethan shift beside her, not closer, not intruding, just present in a way that made the silence feel less empty. "Do you know her father's blood type?" Dr. Patel asked gently. Claire went still. The question was practical, medical, necessary, but it pressed against a place she had spent 5 years trying not to touch. "No," she said. "I do not." Dr. Patel's expression remained professional, But Ethan noticed the change in Claire immediately, the way her shoulders drew inward, the way she looked down as if shame were something visible on the floor. "Is her father available?" the doctor asked. Claire gave a small, humorless breath. No, it was not an answer. It was a door closing. Dr. Patel seemed to understand enough not to push. "All right. We will continue through the blood bank first. If we need family testing, we can discuss it then." He looked toward Ethan. "Mr. Caldwell, may I speak with you for a moment in the hall?" Claire's head snapped up. "Why him?" Dr. Patel paused. Ethan answered before the doctor could. "Because I asked to be updated on logistics, not on Lily's private medical details." Claire searched his face, trying to decide whether that should comfort or frighten her. "Logistics," she repeated. "Blood supply, staffing, transport if needed," Ethan said. "Nothing about your daughter that you do not hear first." Dr. Patel nodded. "That is correct." Claire wanted to object simply because too many things were happening without her permission, but Lily shifted on the bed and gave a weak sigh. Claire leaned down, smoothing a strand of damp hair from her daughter's temple. "I am right here," she whispered again. "I am not going anywhere." Ethan stepped into the hall with Dr. Patel, close enough that Claire could see them through the open doorway, but not hear every word. She watched the doctor speak in a low tone. Ethan's face did not change much, but his eyes did. They sharpened. The man who had sat quietly in the waiting room was gone now. In his place stood someone who looked as if he could move entire buildings if they stood between him and an answer. Claire looked away because she did not want to wonder why that frightened her and steadied her at the same time. A nurse came in to check Lily's temperature again. 102.9, she said with a small smile. "That is a good drop." Claire let out a shaky breath. "Thank God. She is a strong little girl." Claire brushed her thumb over Lily's knuckles. "She has had to be." The nurse glanced at her, then at the doorway where Ethan was still speaking with Dr. Patel. "You have someone looking out for you tonight." Claire almost laughed, but it came out closer to a whisper. "I met him 20 minutes ago." The nurse's expression shifted with surprise. "Oh." She checked the intravenous line, then softened her voice. "Well, whoever he is to you, he is not someone this hospital ignores." When the nurse left, Claire sat very still with those words circling in her mind. Whoever he is to you. Ethan was nothing to her. A stranger. A man with a powerful name, a quiet voice, and eyes that had turned cold when he heard someone had removed Lily from coverage. Yet the hospital had changed around him. The doors had opened. The doctors had come. Her daughter was no longer waiting behind glass. Claire looked toward the counter where Ethan had placed the folded paper. She had not touched it. She told herself not to. Then Lily murmured in her sleep, and Claire reached for it with trembling fingers. It was not a bill. It was a business card, thick and white, with only a name, a direct number, and 3 words beneath it. Caldwell Medical Group. Claire's stomach tightened. She had seen that logo before on the side of the pediatric clinic where Lily had received her checkup last month. Before she could process it, Ethan returned to the doorway. "Miss Whitmore," he said quietly. "My assistant found something about the insurance change." Claire rose slowly, still holding the card. "What did she find?" Ethan's gaze moved to Lily, then back to Claire. The request to remove Lily was not filed by the insurance company. Claire felt the air leave her lungs. "Then who filed it?" Ethan's voice lowered, but every word was clear. "Someone using Mark Reynolds' authorization." Claire heard Mark's name, and for a moment the room seemed to lose its edges. The monitor kept beeping beside Lily's bed. The hallway lights kept shining. A nurse laughed softly somewhere near the station, but all of it felt distant, as if Claire were standing underwater. "No," she said, though she did not know whether she was denying the fact or begging the fact not to be true. "That does not make sense. Mark has not paid attention to Lily's insurance in months. He barely answers the phone when I call." Ethan's expression stayed controlled, but there was something hard beneath it now. The request was submitted through an employer benefits portal 3 weeks ago. It used his credentials. His credentials, Claire repeated. So either he did it, or someone had access to his account. That is what my assistant is confirming. Claire looked down at the business card in her hand, suddenly aware that she was squeezing it so tightly the corner had bent. "You found all of that in a few minutes." "I know where to look." It was not a boast. It was worse than a boast. It was the truth spoken by a man who had spent his life walking through locked doors because the locks had been built by people who answered to him. Claire turned toward Lily, whose feverish face looked softer now under the pale hospital light. 102.9. Still too high, but no longer the terrifying number from the thermometer at home. Her daughter was fighting to come back to her, and somewhere outside this room, paperwork with Mark's name on it had almost left her waiting behind glass. He said he did not change anything that matters, Claire whispered. Ethan's eyes narrowed slightly. When, on the phone, before you helped us, I asked if he changed the policy, and he said he did not change anything that matters. The words tasted different now. Not careless, not random, almost chosen. Ethan took out his phone, but did not dial yet. Do you want him called here? Claire's stomach turned. No. The answer came too quickly, and Ethan noticed. Claire forced herself to breathe. I mean, yes, maybe he should answer for it, but not now. Not while Lily is like this. He will make everything louder. He always does. Ethan lowered the phone. Then not now. Claire looked at him in surprise. You are not going to tell me I have to confront him? Not tonight. Tonight your daughter gets better. Everything else can wait until it stops threatening her care. For a second, Claire had to look away. She was not used to someone separating emergencies from arguments. With Mark, everything became a courtroom where she had to defend her tone, her timing, her needs, even her fear. Ethan simply saw the fire and pointed people toward water. A soft knock came at the open door, and Nurse Morris stepped in with a small paper cup and a fresh digital thermometer. We are going to check her again and give the next dose as ordered, she said. She may be sleepy, but that can be normal with the fever coming down. Claire moved aside but kept one hand on Lily's ankle, needing contact. Lily stirred as the nurse worked, her lashes fluttering. Mommy, I am here. Did we miss school? Claire let out a broken little laugh, the first sound that had not been fear. No, baby. It is still nighttime. Lily's eyes opened just enough to find her. The rain was loud. I know. You carried me. Claire pressed her lips together. I would carry you anywhere. Lily seemed to think about that, then turned her head slightly. Her gaze drifted past Claire to Ethan, standing near the doorway. Is he the phone man? Claire froze, but Ethan's face changed. The authority in him eased, replaced by something almost tender. I suppose I am, he said gently. Lily blinked slowly. Did you call the doctor? Yes. Thank you, she whispered, then closed her eyes again as if those two words had used all the strength she had. Ethan looked down for a moment, and when he looked back up, Claire saw an emotion pass across his face too quickly to name. Regret, maybe, or recognition of something he had not known he needed to hear. Nurse Morris checked the thermometer and smiled. 102.4. Still high, but improving. Claire nodded. Relief and fear tangled together. Good. That is good. After the nurse left, the room settled into a quieter rhythm. Claire finally sat, exhaustion pulling at her bones. Ethan remained near the door, not leaving, not fully entering. You can go, she said softly. You have already done more than enough. I have a doctor I came to see upstairs, he said. But that can wait. Someone is waiting for you. Not the way she is waiting for you. Claire looked at him then, really looked at him, and for the first time she wondered what kind of man said things like that at 2 in the morning and made them sound simple. Before she could answer, his phone vibrated. He glanced at the screen, and the calm in his face disappeared. What is it? Claire asked. Ethan did not respond right away. He read the message once, then again. My assistant found the digital signature on the insurance request. Claire stood slowly. Was it Mark? Ethan's jaw tightened. It was submitted from his account, but the recovery email attached to the change does not belong to him. Then who does it belong to? Ethan looked at Lily, then back at Claire. Someone inside Caldwell Medical Group. Claire stood perfectly still, holding Ethan's words in the air between them as if moving too quickly might make them worse. Someone inside Caldwell Medical Group. The name on the card in her hand suddenly felt heavier, less like a rescue and more like the edge of something she could not see. Inside your company? She asked. Her voice was quiet because Lily had finally drifted into a more peaceful sleep, but the fear underneath it was sharp. Ethan looked at the monitor beside the bed, then back to Claire. Yes. Why would anyone in your company care about my daughter's insurance? It was the question neither of them could step around. Ethan did not answer immediately. He looked toward the hallway where doctors and nurses moved under white lights, where everything appeared orderly, because people needed hospitals to appear orderly. But Claire could see the calculation in his eyes. Not hesitation. Calculation. "I do not know yet," he said. "But I am going to find out." Claire let out a small breath that had no relief in it. That is what people say when they already know more than they are telling. Ethan's eyes returned to her. For the first time since he had appeared beside her in the waiting room, he looked caught between what he could reveal and what he had no right to burden her with while her child slept 3 feet away. "There have been internal issues with benefits administration," he said carefully. "A few suspicious changes across employee-linked plans. Nothing involving a child in emergency care until now." "Employee-linked," Claire repeated. "Mark works in medical sales." "Not for you. He works for Northbridge Supply." "Yes." Ethan's jaw tightened. Northbridge is a vendor under contract with Caldwell Medical Group. Claire stared at him. It was one more invisible thread, one more connection she had not known existed. Mark had always made his job sound important when he wanted praise and meaningless when she asked for help. He sold equipment, handled accounts, traveled for meetings, used phrases like regional partnerships and procurement channels until Claire stopped asking questions. So Mark had access through a vendor portal? Possibly, Ethan said. Or someone gave him help. Claire looked at Lily. Her daughter's lashes rested against flushed cheeks, her small chest rising and falling under the blanket. The fever had not disappeared, but the room no longer felt like it was racing her toward the worst possible ending. That should have been enough for one night. It should have been all she could hold. But fear had a way of making space for more fear. "He told me I was dramatic," she said. "When I said she could not wait until morning. He told me to stop making everything dramatic." Ethan said nothing, and somehow that made it easier for her to continue. "When Lily was born, Mark was not there. He came 2 days later with flowers from a gas station and said hospitals made him uncomfortable. When she had pneumonia at 2, he complained about the copay. When she needed speech therapy, he said children catch up when people stop babying them." Claire's voice tightened, but she kept it steady. "I used to think indifference was the worst thing a father could give a child." Ethan looked at Lily when she said father, and a faint shadow crossed his face. "And now," Claire swallowed. "Now I am wondering if indifference was the kindest version of him." A soft sound came from the hallway, the squeak of polished shoes stopping outside the room. A woman in a dark blazer appeared at the door, holding a tablet against her chest. Her auburn hair was tied neatly at the nape of her neck, and though she looked composed, her eyes moved first to Ethan with urgency. "Mr. Caldwell." Ethan stepped into the hall. "Not here." Claire heard the low murmur of their voices despite his attempt to shield her. The woman spoke quickly. "The recovery email belongs to an administrative account created 6 months ago. It was used only 3 times. One of those times was to access a restricted Family Foundation file." Ethan's expression changed so subtly that Claire might have missed it if she had not been watching him so closely. "Which file?" he asked. The woman hesitated. "The Pediatric Assistance Trust." Ethan went very still. "That trust is private." "Yes, sir." "Who authorized the account?" The woman lowered her voice further. Claire caught only one word, but it landed in the room like a dropped glass. "Caldwell." Ethan turned his head slightly, and Claire saw something colder than anger settle over him. "Say that again." The woman glanced toward Claire, then back to him. "The authorization trace leads to Eleanor Caldwell's office." Claire did not know the name, but she knew what happened to Ethan when he heard it. The man who had moved through the hospital with absolute control suddenly looked as if the floor beneath him had shifted. Claire rose from the chair, careful not to wake Lily. "Who is Eleanor Caldwell?" Ethan turned back toward her slowly. For the first time, he did not look like a stranger with all the answers. He looked like a man who had just found a locked door inside his own home. "My mother," he said. Claire did not know what she expected Ethan to say after that, but the word mother made the room feel smaller. Not because it explained anything, but because it made the danger personal. This was no longer a nameless mistake buried inside a medical system. It was connected to the woman who had given Ethan his name, the woman whose office could apparently reach into private files, vendor accounts, and a little girl's insurance record without ever stepping into the hospital where that little girl was fighting a fever. Ethan dismissed his assistant with a quiet instruction to preserve every access log and send copies to his personal counsel. Then he returned to the doorway, but did not come fully inside. Claire could see the restraint in him, the way he was holding back the storm because Lily was sleeping. "Did your mother do this?" Claire asked softly. Ethan's eyes moved to Lily before settling on Claire. "I do not know yet." But you think she could have. His silence answered before his voice did. Eleanor Caldwell has spent most of her life believing the family name is something to protect at any cost. Claire let out a small, stunned breath. Protect from what? From my daughter having insurance. From anything she considers a complication. The word was so controlled, so clean, that it made Claire's stomach turn. Lily is not a complication. No. Ethan said it once, and the firmness in his voice startled her. She is not. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The monitor kept its steady rhythm. The cooling cloth on Lily's forehead had slipped slightly, and Claire adjusted it with fingers that still shook. She wanted to ask more, but she was afraid of the shape of the answer. Why would Ethan's mother even know Lily existed? Why would a billionaire family care about a child from a one-bedroom apartment across town? Why did every new answer feel like it was pulling Lily closer to a life Claire had never asked to enter? Before she could find the courage to speak, raised voices drifted from the nurse's station. Claire recognized one of them immediately. Her body reacted before her mind did. Her shoulders tightened. Her face went pale. Ethan noticed. Is that him? Claire did not answer, but Mark Reynolds appeared at the far end of the hallway a second later, wearing a wrinkled navy jacket over a t-shirt, his hair damp from the rain, his expression already annoyed. He looked less worried than inconvenienced. A security officer walked near him, not touching him, simply guiding him toward the room after Nurse Morris had apparently asked him to keep his voice down. Claire, Mark called, loud enough for two nurses to look over. What is going on? I got 3 missed calls. Then some woman from a number I do not know starts asking me about insurance authorizations like I committed a crime. Claire stepped into the doorway, blocking his view of Lily as much as she could. Keep your voice down. She is sleeping. Mark glanced past her toward the bed, then back at Claire. So she is fine. The words were small, careless, and somehow worse than shouting. Claire's hand curled around the doorframe. She is not fine. Her fever was 104.6. She needed emergency care. Kids get fevers. They said her insurance was inactive because she was removed from the policy. Mark rolled his eyes, but there was a flicker in them now. Too quick. Too defensive. I already told you I did not do anything that matters. Ethan stepped forward then, not aggressively, not dramatically, just enough that Mark finally noticed him. That is an interesting choice of words. Mark looked him up and down, taking in the black coat, the composed face, the kind of authority that did not need to announce itself. And you are? Claire answered before Ethan could. He is the reason Lily was seen tonight. Mark's mouth tightened into something like a smirk. Of course. I should have known. You find some rich-looking guy in a waiting room, and suddenly I am the villain. Claire flinched, not because the words were true, but because they were designed to make her feel dirty for accepting help. Ethan's expression did not change. Be careful. Mark laughed once. Excuse me. You were standing outside a pediatric emergency room while your daughter is ill. Ethan said evenly. Choose your next words like they matter. My daughter. Mark looked at Claire, and there it was again, the old cruelty dressed as doubt. That is what she keeps saying. The hallway seemed to go silent. Claire felt the color drain from her face. Ethan's eyes sharpened. What does that mean? Mark shrugged, but his confidence was slipping now, turning reckless. Ask her. She never liked talking about the timing. Never liked admitting Lily showed up after a year when our marriage was already done. Claire's voice came out barely above a whisper. Stop. No. Claire, maybe your new hero should know you are not some innocent victim. Ethan moved one step closer, his voice still low. Say one more word about her child. Mark looked ready to answer, but Dr. Patel appeared at the doorway holding another set of results, his face serious enough to cut through everything. Miss Whitmore, Mr. Caldwell, I need to speak with you now. Claire turned, fear returning instantly. Is Lily worse? Her fever is still improving, Dr. Patel said. But the blood bank does not have a compatible unit available in the city right now. Claire's knees nearly gave way. Ethan reached toward her, but stopped just short of touching her without permission. Dr. Patel looked at him. We need to begin family compatibility screening immediately. Mark gave a sharp, uneasy laugh. Well, do not look at me. Dr. Patel did not look at him. His eyes stayed on Ethan. Mr. Caldwell, there is something in Lily's blood profile that matches a marker we have only seen in one registered donor family in our system. Ethan went perfectly still. Claire looked from the doctor to Ethan. her heart pounding so hard she could hear it. "What family?" she asked. Dr. Patel answered carefully. "The Caldwell family." The name seemed to strike every person in the hallway differently. Mark's smirk vanished first. Wiped away by confusion he could not hide. Claire simply stared at Dr. Patel, unable to make the words connect. The Caldwell family. Not a medical phrase. Not a random note in a lab report. A family name. Ethan's family name. Ethan did not move for several seconds. He looked at Lily through the open doorway, at the small child sleeping beneath the hospital blanket. Her flushed face turned slightly toward her mother's chair. Then his eyes returned to Dr. Patel. "Run the screening," he said. His voice was steady, but something beneath it had changed. "Use me first." Claire turned toward him. "Ethan, no. You do not have to do that because of a marker or a coincidence. It may not be a coincidence." The sentence was quiet, but it reached her with the force of a door opening somewhere in the dark. Mark gave a short, nervous laugh. "This is ridiculous. You people are talking like a blood type means something. It does not make him her father." No one answered him. That was what made his voice falter. Dr. Patel kept his focus on Ethan. "We can start a rapid compatibility test immediately. It will not confirm parentage, but it will tell us whether you can safely help if Lily needs it." "Do it," Ethan said. Claire stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You should not get pulled into this." Ethan looked at her then, and the authority in his face softened into something she was not prepared for. "Claire, I am already in it." The way he said her name made her breath catch. Not because it was intimate, but because it sounded familiar, as if some part of him had been trying to place her since the moment she stumbled through the automatic doors. Nurse Morris led Ethan toward a small room across the hall for the screening. Before he followed, he turned to the security officer standing near Mark. "Mr. Reynolds is not to enter Lily's room unless Miss Whitmore gives permission." Mark's face reddened. "You cannot decide that." Ethan looked at him once. "In this hospital, I can decide where you do not go." The security officer nodded. Mark opened his mouth, then seemed to think better of it when Dr. Patel also turned away from him without a word. Claire returned to Lily's bedside, her legs unsteady. She sat down and took her daughter's hand, pressing it gently between her palms. The fever had dropped again, the nurse had said, but Claire could not feel. Relieved now. Her thoughts were moving backward against her will. Past Mark, past the early years of loneliness, past the day she had signed a birth certificate with shaking hands and left the father's name blank because there had been no safe answer. 5 years ago, before Lily, before Mark's bitterness had hardened into something permanent, there had been one night Claire had tried to bury so deeply it became less memory than weather. A charity gala at the Westbrook Hotel. She had been working as a temporary banquet server after losing her office job. She remembered crystal lights, black tuxedos, women in silver dresses, and a man standing alone on a terrace with the city behind him. He had called himself Ethan Cole, not Caldwell. Cole. He had looked younger then, tired in a beautiful suit, trying to escape a room full of people who wanted pieces of him. Claire had found him outside because she was carrying a tray of untouched champagne flutes and looking for a place to breathe. He had smiled when she asked if he was hiding too. They talked for 20 minutes as if neither of them belonged to the lives waiting behind them. He told her his father had died the year before. She told him she was tired of being strong for people who never noticed. It had been a gentle memory, not a scandal, not a mistake she regretted, but a brief pocket of tenderness in a life that had not offered many. By morning, he was gone, called away by some emergency, leaving only a note with a first name and an apology that did not include a number. Claire had told herself it was better that way. Then weeks later, she learned she was pregnant. Mark had already been drifting away, but he came back when he thought fatherhood might make him look noble. By the time Lily was born, his resentment had become the air in the room. Claire looked at her daughter now, at the curve of her cheek, at the dark lashes resting against flushed skin. She had never let herself compare Lily to a man whose last name she did not know. Footsteps returned. Ethan stood in the doorway with a small bandage at the inside of his elbow, his face pale beneath the hospital lights. Dr. Patel followed with the first rapid result on his tablet. "The preliminary compatibility is strong," the doctor said. "Very strong. If Lily needs support, Mr. Caldwell is likely a safe donor." Claire rose slowly. Ethan was staring at her, and she knew from his expression that he had begun traveling backward too. Westbrook Hotel, he said softly. Claire felt the room fall away. You remember. His voice barely held. You were wearing a blue apron over a black dress. You told me the terrace was for guests, but tired people deserved fresh air too. Claire's eyes filled before she could stop them. Mark's voice cut from the hallway, smaller now, almost afraid. What is he talking about? Ethan did not look at him. His eyes stayed on Claire, then moved to Lily. I gave you the wrong last name, he whispered. I thought it would keep my family from interfering with one honest moment in my life. Claire's fingers trembled against the bed rail. I did not know how to find you. Ethan took one careful step into the room, and I did not know I had a daughter. For several seconds, no one in the room spoke. The words seemed too large for the small emergency room, too impossible to fit beside the beeping monitor, the folded pink blanket, the cup of melted ice water on the counter, and Lily's small hand resting inside, Claire's trembling one. Ethan stood near the foot of the bed as if one step closer might frighten the truth away, his eyes moving between Claire and the sleeping child with a kind of stunned restraint that made Claire's chest ache. Mark remained in the hallway, no longer arguing, no longer smirking. The security officer stood beside him, and for once Mark looked like a man who had walked into a story where he did not know his own role. Dr. Patel cleared his throat softly, not to interrupt, but to bring them back to the reason they were all there. The rapid compatibility test is encouraging, he said. That helps us medically tonight, but I want to be clear. It does not prove biological parentage. For that, you would need a proper DNA test, handled through the appropriate lab. Claire nodded, though she could barely feel her own body. How long would that take? Standard testing can take several days. There are expedited options, but not instantly. Ethan looked at the doctor. Start whatever is legally and medically appropriate, with Miss Whitmore's consent. Then he turned to Claire. Only if you want that. It was the consent that broke something open in her. Not the money, not the name, not the powerful phone call. Consent. The simple act of asking before touching the most fragile part of her life. Claire looked at Lily, whose fever had flushed her cheeks the same soft pink they had been when she was a newborn. When Claire had held her in a hospital room alone and promised she would never let the world make her feel unwanted. I want to know, Claire whispered. Not because of money, not because of your family. I want Lily to know the truth when she is old enough to ask. Ethan's face changed at that, the words landing somewhere deeper than she intended. So do I. Dr. Patel gave a quiet nod. I will have the consent forms prepared. For tonight, we focus on keeping her stable. Her numbers are improving, and we may not need any transfusion support at all, but having a compatible donor nearby gives us a safer margin. Claire's knees weakened with relief, so sudden it nearly felt like pain. So she is getting better? She is responding well, Dr. Patel said. We still need to monitor her closely, but yes, this is better than where we were when she arrived. Claire closed her eyes for one breath, just one, and pressed Lily's fingers to her lips. Did you hear that, baby? She whispered. You are doing so good. Lily did not wake, but her hand curled faintly against Claire's palm. Ethan watched that tiny movement as if it had rewritten the world. Then Mark's voice came from the hallway, quieter now, but still sharp enough to cut. This is insane. You cannot just decide she belongs to him because of some old hotel story. Claire looked up slowly. She had expected anger from Mark. She had expected denial. What she had not expected was fear. But it was there, beneath his words, making them brittle. No one is deciding anything tonight, she said. Lily is sick. That is all that matters. That is easy for you to say now, Mark said. You have a billionaire standing in the room. Ethan's head turned. You removed her insurance. Mark's mouth opened, then closed. I did not remove anything. I logged into my benefits account because somebody from Caldwell's vendor office told me there were duplicate dependent records causing compliance issues. They said Lily was not eligible under my plan unless I confirmed legal responsibility. I clicked what they told me to click. Claire stared at him. You never told me. Because I thought it was paperwork. You thought removing a child from insurance was paperwork. Her voice cracked, but it did not rise. That made it worse somehow. Mark looked away. I did not think she would get sick. The simplicity of the answer emptied the room. Claire felt no triumph, no satisfaction, only a tired sadness, so old it felt carved into her bones. Ethan took out his phone. Who contacted you? Mark hesitated. Ethan's voice lowered. Mr. Reynolds. Your next answer determines whether this remains an internal investigation or becomes a legal one before sunrise. Mark swallowed. A woman named Vivian called me. Vivian Hart. She said she worked with Caldwell Family Administration. Ethan's expression darkened. Claire saw the name affect him, though he controlled it quickly. Vivian Hart is my mother's executive secretary. A soft chime came from Dr. Patel's tablet. He glanced down, and a small smile eased the tension in his face. Her fever is now 101.8. Claire turned back to Lily, tears finally spilling over. 101.8. She repeated, as if it were a prayer. Ethan stepped closer to the bed, stopping beside Claire, but leaving space between them. Lily stirred, her lashes fluttering. Her eyes opened halfway, unfocused at first, then finding her mother. "Mommy, I am here." Lily's gaze drifted past Claire and landed on Ethan. Her voice was weak, but clear enough to hear. The phone man stayed. Ethan's breath caught. Claire saw it. The billionaire, the hospital owner, the man who could command administrators and terrify Mark with one sentence, stood undone by a sick child's sleepy observation. "Yes," Ethan said gently. "I stayed." Lily blinked. Slowly. "Good." Then her eyes closed again, and the room seemed to exhale around her. Claire wiped her face with the back of her hand, embarrassed by the tears, but Ethan did not look away. "Claire," he said softly, "whether the test confirms what we think or not, Lily will never wait behind glass for care again." Claire looked at him, wanting to believe that promise and terrified of what believing it might cost. Before she could answer, Ethan's phone lit up with a new message. He read it, and the fragile warmth in his expression disappeared. "What is it?" Claire asked. Ethan looked toward the hallway, where Mark stood silent and pale. "My mother is on her way here." Ethan's words left the room colder than the rain outside. "My mother is on her way here." Claire looked from his face to Lily's sleeping form and felt the fragile calm of the last few minutes tighten into something brittle. She had survived Mark's indifference, the hospital glass, the insurance denial, and the terror of watching her child's fever climb past 104 degrees. But the idea of Eleanor Caldwell walking into this room made a new fear rise inside her, one without shape. She did not know that woman. She did not know her voice, her face, or what kind of power she carried. All Claire knew was that someone connected to Eleanor's office had reached into Lily's life and removed protection from a child who had done nothing except exist. "Why is she coming?" Claire asked. Ethan slid his phone into his coat pocket, but his eyes stayed on the doorway. "Because she knows I found the access trail." "And what does she want?" His answer came after a pause. "Control." Claire looked down at Lily's hand, still tucked in hers. "Then she cannot come in here." Ethan turned to her fully. The old version of Claire, the one trained by years of apologizing before asking for anything, expected him to correct her, to explain that Eleanor Caldwell could go wherever she wanted because people with that kind of name rarely heard the word no. Instead, Ethan said, "She will not enter this room unless you allow it." Claire swallowed hard. "I do not allow it." "Then she stays outside." The simplicity of that answer nearly brought tears back to Claire's eyes. She nodded once, then sat carefully, because if she kept standing, her legs might give out. Mark had been moved farther down the hall by the security officer after Dr. Patel insisted the hallway remain quiet. He was still visible through the glass panel near the nurse's station, pacing with his phone in his hand, looking more trapped than concerned. Claire wondered if he was calling someone, or if for once he had no one left to blame. Ethan remained near the door, shoulders squared, the bandage on his arm bright white under the hospital lights. "Claire," he said softly, "before she gets here, there is something I need to ask, and you do not have to answer if you cannot." Claire already knew what it was. She had known since he said Westbrook Hotel, and the past came rushing into the room between them. She looked at Lily's face, calmer now, her fever easing little by little, and understood that the truth could not stay buried simply because it was painful to hold. "You want to know what happened after that night?" Ethan's voice was quiet. "Only what you want to tell me." Claire let out a slow breath. "I found out I was pregnant 6 weeks later." The words felt strange after so many years of saying them to no one. "I was working 2 jobs then. Banquet shifts when I could get them, mornings at a bakery in South Boston. I thought I was just exhausted. Then the smell of coffee started making me sick, and one of the older women at the bakery told me to take a test." Ethan did not move. He looked as if every sentence was being placed carefully into a wound he had not known was there. I went back to the Westbrook, Claire continued. I asked the events manager if there was a guest list from that gala. I only had the name Ethan Cole. He said there were hundreds of guests and no one by that name. I thought maybe you had lied because you were married or famous, or because men at hotels sometimes gave false names to women they never planned to see again. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. I was not married. I know that now. Her voice softened, not forgiving yet, but no longer accusing. Back then I did not know anything. I had no number, no last name, no way to find you. And I was scared. Lily shifted slightly, and Claire paused to smooth the blanket near her shoulder. Mark came back around that time. We had already been separated emotionally for months, but not legally. He said he wanted to try again. I told him I was pregnant. I told him there was a chance the baby was not his. Ethan's jaw tightened, but he stayed silent. At first, he acted noble. He said a child needed a father. He said we could make it work. But after Lily was born, every time she cried, every time money was tight, every time someone said she did not look like him, he changed a little more. He never asked for a test. I think he was afraid of the answer. It was easier to punish us for the uncertainty. Ethan looked toward Lily then, and something in his face broke open quietly. You raised her alone. Even when he was in the room, Claire said. The honesty hurt, but it also freed something in her chest. I did not leave the father line blank because I did not care who her father was. I left it blank because I had no proof, no name, and no way to give her anything except myself. A soft commotion rose near the nurse's station. The elevator doors opened with a polished chime, and a woman stepped out in a cream wool coat, silver hair swept perfectly back, pearls resting at her throat despite the hour. She did not look hurried. She looked expected. Every staff member nearby seemed to straighten before they realized they had done it. Ethan turned toward her, and Claire knew without being told. Eleanor Caldwell had arrived. The woman's eyes moved past Ethan, past the security officer, past Mark, and landed on the treatment room where Lily slept. Her expression did not soften. It sharpened. Ethan stepped into the doorway, blocking her view. You are not coming in. Eleanor lifted her chin. Then we will speak outside, before that woman mistakes a medical coincidence for a family claim. Claire rose slowly from the chair, her hand still holding Lily's. Ethan's voice dropped. Choose your next words carefully, Mother. Eleanor's gaze flicked to Claire, cool and assessing. I already did. 5. I already did, 5 years ago, Eleanor said. And the words landed so softly that for one stunned second Claire did not understand them. Ethan did. His face changed before anyone else moved, the last trace of hesitation disappearing from his eyes. What did you just say? Eleanor's gaze remained steady, almost bored, as if she were discussing a boardroom inconvenience instead of a child sleeping behind him with a hospital bracelet around her wrist. I said I made a choice when you were too grief-stricken after your father's death to recognize a trap. Claire felt her hand tighten around Lily's. A trap. Ethan stepped closer to his mother, keeping his voice low, but every syllable carried. Do not speak about Claire that way. Eleanor's eyes flicked toward Claire again. Claire Whitmore, temporary banquet staff at the Westbrook Hotel, living in a sublet in Dorchester, 2 overdue credit accounts at the time, no family wealth, no social standing, no reason to be near my son except opportunity. Claire went pale, not because Eleanor's facts were all correct, but because someone had gathered them. Someone had looked into her life when she had been young, scared, and pregnant, and decided she was nothing more than a problem to be handled. Ethan looked as if he had stopped breathing. You knew about her. Of course I knew. You left the gala early the next morning. Vivian collected the security notes after your name appeared in a staff report. A young server had been seen speaking privately with you on the terrace. I had people make inquiries. Claire's voice came out small, but clear. I came back to the hotel. I asked for Ethan Cole. Eleanor did not deny it. And you were told there was no guest by that name. Ethan turned fully toward his mother now. Because you made sure of it. Because there was no Ethan Cole, Eleanor replied. There was Ethan Caldwell, heir to a medical group worth billions, and a woman from a catering roster asking questions 6 weeks later. Claire felt the room tilt again, but this time she did not sit down. She looked at Lily, at the child who had grown inside her while strangers decided what her life was allowed to become. You knew I was pregnant. Eleanor's mouth tightened slightly. It was the first crack in her composure. I knew you claimed to be. Ethan's voice dropped to something almost unrecognizable. Answer her. Eleanor exhaled through her nose. Yes, I knew. The hallway seemed to fall silent around them. Even Mark, still standing farther down with the security officer, had stopped pacing. Claire felt tears rise, but they were not the same helpless tears from the intake desk. These burned differently. I looked for him, she said. I went back twice. I left my number with a manager. A number that was never given to me. Ethan said, not asking. Eleanor lifted her chin. You were in no condition to be chased by every woman who thought a Caldwell baby was a retirement plan. Ethan flinched as if the words had struck something deeper than anger. That baby is sleeping in that room. And if the child is yours, we will handle it properly. There is no we, Ethan said. Not anymore. Eleanor's eyes hardened. Do not be dramatic. I protected you. You protected the family image. I protected your future. Ethan looked back through the doorway at Lily, whose fever-flushed face had softened in sleep. My future is 5 years old, and she spent tonight waiting for care because someone connected to your office removed her insurance. Eleanor's expression did not change quickly enough. Claire saw it. So did Ethan. Vivian made an administrative correction, Eleanor said. An unauthorized correction, Ethan replied. Targeting a child. A child tied to an unverified claim that could destabilize this family. Claire stepped forward then, still inside the room, still holding Lily's hand, but close enough for Eleanor to hear every word. You do not get to call my daughter a claim. Eleanor looked at her as though surprised she had spoken. Claire's voice trembled, but it did not break. I did not ask for your money. I did not ask for your name. I did not even know your son's real last name. I raised Lily through ear infections, rent notices, preschool forms, snow days, grocery lists, and nights when I skipped dinner so she could have strawberries in her lunchbox. She is not a threat to your family. She is a little girl who says thank you to strangers and apologizes when she coughs too loud. And tonight, while you were protecting a name, she was burning with fever behind a glass window. For the first time, Eleanor had no immediate answer. Ethan looked at Claire with an expression so raw she had to look away. Dr. Patel approached from behind, holding a tablet and a small packet of forms. His timing was gentle but unmistakable. Miss Whitmore, Mr. Caldwell, the consent forms are ready. We can send the DNA sample for expedited processing. Given the medical relevance, we should also document the compatibility findings in Lily's chart. Claire nodded. Do it. Ethan turned to her. Are you sure? Claire looked at him then, really looked at him, past the wealth, past the power, past the black coat and the phone call that had changed the night. She saw the man from the terrace, older now, shaken, carrying the grief of 5 missing years in his eyes. Lily deserves the truth, she said. So do you. Ethan's voice softened. And you. The nurse brought the swabs. Claire signed first, her hand steadier than she expected. Ethan signed after her, his name dark and decisive on the page. Eleanor watched from the hall, her face closed, but she no longer looked in control of the room. A few minutes later, Lily stirred. Her eyes opened halfway, cloudy with sleep but calmer than before. Mommy, I am here, baby. Lily looked past her to Ethan. Are you still staying? Ethan moved closer, stopping beside the bed only when Claire gave a small nod. He lowered himself to one knee so he would not tower over her. Yes, he said, his voice rough with feeling. I am staying. Lily blinked slowly. Good. Mommy gets scared when I get sick. Claire covered her mouth with one hand, but the tears came anyway. Ethan looked at Claire, then back at Lily. Then I will be brave for both of you until she does not have to be scared. Lily seemed satisfied with that. Her small fingers shifted on the blanket, and after a moment, Ethan placed one finger near her hand. She curled her fingers around it with sleepy trust. The monitor continued its steady rhythm. Dr. Patel glanced at the screen and smiled faintly. 101.2. Claire closed her eyes as relief passed through her like sunrise. Ethan did not move his hand. Eleanor stood outside the room, watching her son kneel beside the child she had tried to erase from the family record. And for the first time that night, the power in the hospital did not belong to the Caldwell name. It belonged to a little girl holding her father's finger without knowing yet who he was. By dawn, the rain had thinned into a pale mist against the hospital windows, and the world outside Mercy General looked washed clean in the soft gray light. Claire had not slept. She had sat beside Lily's bed through every temperature check, every quiet footstep, every gentle adjustment of the intravenous line, counting the spaces between beeps until the numbers finally stopped feeling like a cliff edge. 100.9, 100.4, 99.8. When Nurse Morris smiled and said the fever had broken, Claire covered her face with both hands and cried without sound, not because everything was fixed, but because her daughter's skin no longer burned beneath her touch. Lily woke just after 6, drowsy and confused, asking if she could have apple juice and whether missing kindergarten meant she still had to color the letter worksheet in her backpack. Claire laughed through tears and kissed her forehead, this time feeling warmth that belonged to life, not danger. Ethan stood near the window, his black coat folded over the chair, his sleeves rolled neatly to his forearms, the small bandage still visible where the compatibility test had been done. He had stayed the entire night. Not in the way powerful people stayed, by sending staff and waiting for reports, but in the way frightened parents stayed, silent, alert, and unwilling to move too far from the bed. When Lily noticed him, she lifted one small hand from the blanket. "Phone man," she whispered. Ethan stepped closer, and Claire saw him gather himself before smiling. "Good morning, Lily. I am not hot anymore." His voice softened. "I heard. That is the best news I have had in a long time." Lily considered that with sleepy seriousness. "Mommy cried." "I know, but happy crying." Ethan looked at Claire, and the look held too many things for mourning. Apology, wonder, grief, and a promise he had not yet earned the right to speak out loud. "Sometimes happy crying is what happens when fear finally lets go," he said. Lily seemed to accept that and closed her eyes again, still holding the little paper cup of apple juice with both hands. Dr. Patel came in a few minutes later with the update Claire had been waiting for. Lily would need to remain for observation, but the infection was responding to treatment. Her fever had broken, and no transfusion support was needed. The rare blood profile would remain in her chart, along with Ethan's compatibility information, in case it was ever medically relevant again. "You brought her in at the right time," the doctor said. Claire held Lily's hand and nodded, unable to say that she had almost been too late because she had believed for one terrible minute that glass, paperwork, and money were stronger than a mother's voice. Outside the room, Eleanor Caldwell waited near the nurse's station, no longer surrounded by the invisible authority she had carried in with her. Ethan had not allowed her inside. He had spoken to her in the hall before sunrise, quietly enough that Lily did not wake, firmly enough that every person nearby understood something had changed. Vivian Hart was suspended pending investigation. The access logs had been sent to council. Mark Reynolds had given a formal statement before leaving under the pale, defeated look of a man who finally understood that neglect could have consequences. None of that repaired the years Claire had lost. None of it gave Ethan back Lily's first steps, first words, first birthday candles, or the nights Claire had sat alone beside a crib with unpaid bills on the kitchen table. But when Ethan returned to the room, he did not pretend that money could replace time. He stood beside Claire, looking at the child they were only beginning to understand, and said, "I missed 5 years because the truth was kept from both of us. I cannot undo that, but I can start by never letting anyone make decisions about Lily. Without you again." Claire looked at him for a long moment. "Being her father is not a phone call you make and a problem you solve. I know. It is school forms, bedtime fears, favorite snacks, doctor appointments, and remembering that she hates green beans unless they are mixed with buttered noodles." Ethan's eyes shone, but his voice stayed steady. "Then I will learn slowly, and I will start wherever you let me." Claire looked down as Lily stirred again, her small fingers reaching until they found Ethan's hand at the edge of the blanket. She held on without opening her eyes, trusting him in the simple, unguarded way children sometimes trusted before adults taught them caution. Claire did not forgive the past that morning. She did not hand over her life because a billionaire had appeared in the worst night of it. But she allowed herself to believe that Lily's story had not ended behind a hospital window. When the first sunlight touched the floor, Ethan's assistant appeared quietly at the door with a sealed envelope. Ethan stepped out to take it, opened it, and read the single page inside. Claire saw his expression harden, not with panic, but with purpose. "What is it?" she asked. Ethan folded the paper once and looked toward the hallway where his mother had been standing. Eleanor was gone. The authorization trail did not begin with Vivian, he said. It began with the Caldwell Family Trust. Claire's arms tightened around Lily. Ethan looked back at them, and his voice lowered into a promise. Then this is not over. But this time, they will have to go through me first.